All right, today we're going to do modeling with functions. So we're going to model like real world problems with some functions, and then we're going to solve them. So some guidelines to follow. Catch up there. Number one, make sure you identify the variable. So they're not going to tell you what x is or what y is. You need to pick something to be x. There's usually like 2 or 3 options you can use, and either one is fine. Make sure you write it down so I know what you're talking about. The second one is write the equation. This is the hardest step. Sometimes you have to write it out in words first. Sometimes you need to draw a picture. But try something. Just try it and then see if it works. If it doesn't work, go back and try again. So this will be the hardest step, is figuring out the equation. The third step then is to actually take that, solve, and see if your answers make sense. So if you're talking about speeds and you get -50, well, it doesn't really make sense because you can't go in -50 speed. It's impossible. So make sure once you figure out your answer, it makes sense in the contents of your problem. All right, so example 1. We have that Mary inherits $100,000 and she invests it in 2 certificates of deposit. So one pays 6% interest and the other pays 4.5% interest. Her total interest for the whole year is $5,025. So how much did she invest at each rate? So first step, pick your variable. Here, it doesn't really matter what you pick, but we have 2 things. We want to look at what we're trying to find. So when you're picking your variable, look at the question. So we want to know how much money is invested at each rate. So we want some sort of money invested. It needs to be our variable. We can either pick it at the 6% rate or the 7% rate because we're asking for 2 things. So pick one of them to be your variable. So I'm going to say X is the money invested at 6%. You could just as easily say it's the money invested at 4.5%. It will work out almost exactly the same. But you're picking your variable based on the question. So if the question is how much money is invested, your variable better be how much money is invested at something. You want it to match your question. Okay, so now we're going to write this out. So I'll make a note again. X is our money at 6%. So when you're doing these, it's sometimes easiest to write it out in words. So we have information here. We have a total of $100,000 that she had. We have a 6%, a 4.5%, and then the total amount of interest. So you have to think about what you can calculate. So some of them will do speed or miles per hour. So think miles per hour. If you're getting your speed, you have miles time divided by amount of time. Same with here. If we want the total amount of interest, you have to take the money you're invested times your percentage is going to give you the interest you got. So if we write this out, you have your interest at 6% plus the interest at 4.5% equals your total interest, right? But then how do you calculate interest? Interest is the money invested times your interest rate. So this is going to be the interest rate. So at 6% times money invested. Plus the same here. Your interest rate times the money invested is going to give you your total interest, which is $5,025 for this. Okay, so now we're ready to add in the variable. We said X is the interest at 6%. So this is going to be X right here. And then you need to make sure that your you need to make sure your percentages are in terms of decimals. So this is going to become 0.06x like this. We can convert this other one here like that. And now we need to figure out what goes right here. So we know we invested X amount into 6%, but then how much did we invest into the other one? How do you figure that out? So we need this something in terms of X. We can't just call this Y because then there's 2 variables and that doesn't work very well. But if we think about this in real life, say she invested 50,000 in X at the 6%. What's left over? How would you figure that out? Well, she had 100,000 to start out with. So if she invested 50,000 into one of them, well, there's 50,000 left over for the other one. You get that from subtracting. So we can take our original 100,000 and subtract whatever we invested right here, and that will give us the leftover, which had to be invested into the other one. And that is our equation. And now we're just going to solve this. So I'm going to go on to the next slide again, and we'll rewrite that same equation. So we have 0.06x plus 0.045 times 100,000 minus x has to equal your total interest of 5,025. And now you're just solving. As a note, if you had switched your variables, if x was the percent in the 4.5, you would just switch these two things, and then it would work out very similarly. So if we solve this, we have 0.06x plus, multiply that in, you get 4,500 minus 0.045 x equals your 5,025. Combine your like terms here and get 0.15. Oop, I'm missing a zero there. 0.015 x plus 4,500 equals your 5,025. Subtract your 4,500 from both sides. 0.015 x equals 525. Divide, and x equals 35,000. So we're not quite done. Last step is to figure out, did we answer the question? So the question was, how much money is invested at each rate? So then we need two answers. So this x is the money at the 6%. So we had 35,000 at 6%. But we also need to answer how much was invested at the 4.5%. You can find this then by going back to our original total of money. So we know 35,000 was in one. You can subtract to get the amount in the other. So she had to invest 65,000 in the other one so that together they equal 100,000. And then check to make sure this makes sense. Like, do you get thousands of dollars as an answer, or do you get like $2? $2 wouldn't really make sense. All right, we'll do one more. So here, Kim took a trip from Davenport to Omaha. The distance is 300 miles. I'm going to switch colors so I don't have blue on blue. She traveled part by bus, part by train. So two chunks or modes of transport. On the bus, she averaged 40 miles per hour, and the train was 60 miles per hour. Total, it took 5.5 hours. Our question then is, how long did Kim spend on the train? So when you're picking your variable, you're looking at your question. We want to know how long did she spend on the train. So I'm going to make that my variable. We'll say x equals time on the train. Because then when I solve for x, I'm done. Okay, so now what? We need to figure out how to write this equation. So we know the time is 5.5 hours, and you know that the distance was 300 miles. So we need to figure out what's the easiest way to do this. There's always more than one way, so you could do like time plus time has to equal total time, or you could do distance plus distance equals total distance. Here we have miles per hour, so I'm going to do distance, because I can do time times distance. Sorry, time times speed is distance. That's a nice multiplication. If you did it the other way around, you'd have to do like speed divided by distance to get your time, and that's not as convenient. So I'm going to do distance on the train plus distance on the bus has to equal your total distance. So distance on the train is going to be the speed of the train times the time on the train. And then you want speed of the bus times the time on the bus has to equal the total distance, which was 300. So the speed of the train we know was 60 miles per hour. We said x was the time on the train. Speed of the bus was 40 miles per hour, but we don't have a time on the bus variable, so we're going to need to use this 5.5 hours here. So if you take 5.5 hours minus the time on the train, you get the time left on the bus equals 300. And now we just need to solve. So if we're going to solve this, you have 60x plus 40 times 5.5 minus x equals 300. And then you want to solve. So 60x plus 220 minus 40x equals 300. Combine like terms, and you get 20x plus 220 equals 300. Subtract 20x equals 80, x equals 4. And then figure out, did we answer the question? So we wanted to know, how long did Wendy spend on the train? Here she spent 4 hours on the train. Doesn't ask us about the bus, so we don't care about it, so we're done. You could subtract from 5.5 and get 1.5 hours on the bus, but you don't have to because it didn't ask for that. And that's it. So go on Schoology and do your homework.